We'll start the webinar in just a couple of minutes, but if you haven't found that poll on the right side, go ahead and give yourself a try at remembering memorable business taglines and dates and movie quotes there on the right, some memorable items from popular media. If you're having trouble finding that poll, look for the words polling, and click the arrow or caret next to it, or if you're on a Windows machine, the icon will be at the top. You can view and not view that. Super helpful. Super helpful. All right. Just got a couple minutes before we're going to get started. Go ahead and fill out that poll if you haven't already. And if you're having trouble or have questions finding things, just send a message in the chat. All right, it's 9:30, so I'm going to pass this over to David, and we're going to get your webcam up and started here, David. All right, let's go over here to the slides. And I think you're all set. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chris. Hello to everyone. Welcome to our webinar entitled Developing Memorable Presentations. My name is Dave Langley, and I'm a staff member at the Center for Educational Innovation. The webinar is being offered to all 5 of our system campuses, so hello to everyone who is viewing this from Crookston, Duluth, Morris, Rochester, and the Twin Cities campus as well. If you're viewing a recording, information helpful and valuable to you as you develop your own presentations and your own teaching. I have a few housekeeping items in order that I want to get to initially. First, I want to thank a lot of people who have been involved in helping to get this prepared. My office mate, Janelle Nivens, I have in the room with me as well, Mary Jetter, Senenge, and Zenge, and most importantly, Chris Gorman, who has been instrumental in helping me do this organization and helping me prepare this. I may well be talking to all of them at some point, so if you hear some voices in the background, that's just a conversation that we're carrying on. Second, I do want to encourage all of you, particularly all of you live participants, to interact, taking advantage of our chat panel, of our activities we have within the PowerPoints themselves. And please fill out that chat panel that's in the upper right-hand corner of your screen for a number of the activities that we will have. We do have a poll open right now. Hopefully, those of you who are involved at this point will be able to finish up in short order. I'll be closing that poll in just a few minutes. Later in the session, I'll be directing you to a folder and also to a workbook, and we have those set up as well. Like, you should be able to find them. They're connected to the webinar. I'm going to turn my camera off at this point, and I'll also be closing the poll. So let's take a look at the poll itself and see what we have as far as some of the answers to these questions.
So last call, you got another 10 seconds here to, if you want to give some last guesses here. We'll give those last two people something to close out, and then we'll get to C.
Okay, here we go. The 6 items that I have for this poll were drawn from a couple of different sources. The first 2 here come from the American Film Institute, and they are the 2 most memorable lines in movie history. I agree you may have to be you have a certain age to remember these ones or to know these ones well. But first one says, is frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. And the responses I'm seeing on that are mostly in line with the correct answer, which is Clark Gable from Gone with the Wind. I see a few of you have Humphrey Bogart down as well. But this is a Clark Gable line, famous last words in Gone with the Wind. The second one is from Marlon Brando, the Godfather. The line is, I'm going to make an offer you can't refuse. And I see we are at nearly all individuals who have found that one as well. The third one, memorable dates in U.S. history. Yes, the Pearl Harbor bombing was December 7th, 1941. You can almost hear Roosevelt in the background saying those words, and I see only one individual who has another date on that. The fourth one is a memorable date as well, about the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. I remember where I was at that time, and that is, again, at a very high percentage of November 22nd, 1963. Finally, memorable business taglines from Nike, of course, is this line, just do it. And we have nearly everyone, all but one individual on that one. Second one is the happiest place on earth. That is Disneyland. My kids were relatively young when we had a chance to go to Disneyland, so that's almost everyone as well. And for many of you, the answers to these poll questions are automatic, and that is precisely the point. They are burned deeply into your memory. And one of the key questions for today is why? Why do some ideas burn so deeply into our memory, and why are some others so quickly and easily forgotten? We'll be focusing on that very question today. The resources for today, I have 4 books on here, but there's another one I'll mention as well. The primary one is the Made to Stick book by Chip and Dan Heath. They are 2 brothers who are authors who have written a number of books that have been on the New York Times bestseller list. This one was, as well as the book was originally written in 2008, so it's 10 years old at this time. The other books on here are Howard Gardner's Changing Minds, a very good book also by Gar Reynolds called Presentations In, and also our own Twin Cities staff member Ann Fandry's book, Academic Slide Design, which I use regularly. You'll see that both Ann's book and the Presentations In book are going to be found, the elements of that are going to be found within the presentation today. But for the most part, we will be talking about the Made to Stick book. So let me tell you a story. The story has to do with some work I did a number of years ago, 30 years ago, when I was a staff member at Oregon State University. I was in charge of overseeing a number of teaching assistants who were teaching activity classes. This is an example of a photo that would be very common on a tennis court. The instructor is sort of to the left center there. She is wearing a white hat, very close to the pole. Up and down, she's holding onto a clipboard. If you look on the far ends of this picture, you can see the kind of thing that's always a problem in tennis instruction. On the far right-hand end of this are two individuals who can probably hear her well, but their heads are sort of down. They would not be able to see any demonstration. Demonstrations are very common in tennis instruction. There are also people behind her who also will not be able to see the demonstration. So here I was standing off to the side listening to her describe a tennis stroke, and she did a short demonstration as well. And I decided to follow two women who walked off to their own tennis court after the instruction was over. And I listened carefully to one of them. It's been instructive for now, again, as I say, 30 years. And one student said to the other, "What does she want us to do again?" And the student responded, "I don't know. Let's just hit it back and forth." And I've thought about that over the years. I've thought about how many times students probably said that about me when I gave tennis instruction or golf instruction or something else, and how easy it is to not necessarily be tuned in well to the core message that the individual may have been giving or that I was giving at the time. I've also thought about the classroom equivalent of this. Many times I've given instructions to students about a project or a task they have to do. And I wonder how many of them walk away saying, what did they want us to do? What does he actually want us to do at this time? So group tennis instruction is not particularly sticky for oftentimes, but also a classroom situation is the same. The important point I want to bring home is found on this slide itself, which is that, and this comes from the Heath brothers as well, that memorable presentations share the same principles underlying any sticky message, whether that message is delivered by a teaching assistant, a staff member, a faculty member, and whatever the venues may be as well. So what did the Heath brothers come up with? They came up with 6 principles. Chip Heath is a marketing professor at Stanford. His brother Dan is a staff member at Duke University. And they took advantage of a wonderful mnemonic. The left side of the screen shows this mnemonic. The SUCCES spells out success, easily rememberable. But on the right side are the short messages that are aligned with each of these principles. So simple, by that we mean the phrase create core messages. Unexpected is about gaining and maintaining attention. Michael Sandel, who is a well-known professor at Harvard University, says that the core task for individuals who are teaching is to command attention and hold it. And certainly this principle points to that point as well. The third one called concrete, about grounding our ideas in sensory detail. The fourth is called credible. We have to help our students or our audience believe. The fifth is emotional. We have to invest our students. We, as presenters, have to help invest our students in the content. And stories or narratives are very important. They get students to act. So I have a big claim in this presentation. I'll say it up front. And that is that these 6 principles are a lens. They are a way of focusing our attention to help us structure our presentations and to help us examine our presentations. What worked well? Why didn't it work well? What can we do about that? Now, interestingly, I am very tuned in to cognitive load. I talk about it a lot at most of the sessions that I do, no matter what the topic is. And I want to emphasize how very easy it is to forget about cognitive load, even if you're in the middle of it. My team here reminded me of this a few weeks ago when I was prepared to talk about all 6 principles, and they gently reminded me, Dave, you will never do this. It will not happen. You are going to have to find a way to shorten this up. And so Chris was instrumental in saying, cut this down, and I have cut it down to just 3 principles. Simple, concrete, and emotional. And they are principles that I tune into very well. I'm going to spend a little bit more time than normal on the first principle under simple, but I'll hopefully spend adequate time on concrete and emotional. The important thing is to see the Developing Memorables presentation folder for more materials. We have all that material on there. You'll be able to find all information for all principles. So, first principle. I want to be very deliberate on this first principle. I'll be as slow as I need to be, and it'll be a few minutes before we get through this one. Simple. What does it mean? Well, unfortunately, the word itself is not the best example. It fits the Heath Brothers mnemonic of success, but what tends to happen is people may often misunderstand what this means. So here's the key part of what simple refers to. Create a core message or a set of core messages in compact form. Core messages, compact form. Find the core, find the heart of what you want to deal with, and really pound that home. And you see this in many different venues. I've described a few of them in academia, but I also brought along a few examples as well that I just saw on the drive into work today, also in today's newspaper. So we see core messages in many different formats. Course titles themselves. Here's a Grand Challenges curriculum on the Twin Cities campus, a title for one of the courses called Seeking Solutions to Global Health Issues. So certainly that tells us immediately, what should we be focusing on in this course? In this course, students are going to be seeking solutions to global health issues. I love that title. Taglines. Taglines are interesting. We have one, of course, for the entire system, and that's Driven to Discover. But if you get on the Morris website, you'll see Get Started on Tomorrow at UMD. The line used to be a great university on a great lake, and that UMR is a premier undergraduate health sciences university. At Crookston, small campus, big degree. Taglines are part of every university, and they are very clearly core messages in compact form. Finally, any research summary that we see, this one came off the University of Minnesota Twin Cities screen a few days ago, which is the summary saying, cancer-causing chemical formed in e-cigarette users. Boy, very, very clear what that summary is going to be about. But, you know, I've looked in the newspaper just fairly recently. Here's a headline, World's Oldest Man Dies at 113. Really, it just tells you almost everything you need to know in that one sentence, that one framing there as well. So on billboards, as I drive in, the Emily program, We Heal Eating Disorders. What a wonderful forward line that describes the mission as well. So a lot of that is easy to find. As you get tuned into the phrasing of simple, you'll find it virtually everywhere. Now, here's what it doesn't look like. I want to spend a minute on this on the next two slides that says what it doesn't look like. I used to do this. I was pretty good at doing this, in fact, over many years as a faculty member. You can see that here's about 10 or 11 statements. This is not what compact form looks like. So very small print meant that students at the back of the room could not see the sentences, or often read directly off the slides because I didn't know the content well. I was familiar with this way of teaching because many of the teachers that I had been a student at had used this kind of method. It'd been much better if I just given a handout. Look at all the words on this page, and I was good at being able to put a lot of these kind of words up because I need to keep my place. This is not compact form, but this is not uncommon, and I was very good at carrying out this kind of a presentation for many years. Again, when you hear the word simple, it often refers to, or people think it refers to dumbing down, but it really is about prioritizing, and I would call it relentlessly prioritizing. So how can we use this principle immediately in our classrooms? Well, the first thing, and we're coming up soon on a little task for you, the first thing to consider is on a course level, and that is to consider focusing your course on a single big idea. This Grand Challenge course that I mentioned earlier is labeled, Can We Feed the World Without Destroying It? Again, what a great way to tune people in to what the big idea is in this course. In this course, students are going to be looking at solutions. Can this happen? Can you feed the world without destroying it? So, good, short, focused idea of what the students will be doing in this course, a single big idea. As you teach your course, or for those of you who are simply doing presentations, maybe you're doing a workshop, you're doing a presentation that is needed for your work setting, The idea, again, is to focus on a single big idea. And your presentation does not have 5 big ideas. It has 1. And you've got to really try to find that core and see what it is. So here's our first task. First task is to think of a course or a presentation that you know well or you have taught very recently. I want you to try to think through what a successful participant or what a successful student will be able to do by the end of the course in 8 words or less. We've done this at a number of our presentations on developing on this particular topic, which we sometimes call sticky teaching or developing memorable presentations. And here are examples, 2 examples of what we've gotten from our faculty. In the intro to Statistics course, the faculty member wrote out on the whiteboard, so students will be able to build arguments from data. Sometimes that may be labeled as consistently build arguments from data. Another faculty member in theater arts wrote out students would be able to find community and meaning through performance. So great focus. What a nice way of phrasing what students will be expected to do. So here's your task. It'll take a minute or 2 to do this. This can take longer than a minute. Unfortunately, we only have a few minutes to do that. So here we go. Think of the course or the presentation that you know a great deal about. You have taught it in the past, or you are prepared to teach it for this fall. Try to get to the core of that presentation or course in 8 words or less. Post that response in the chat panel. Remember to send your message to all participants. So here we go. Chris is going to play some music in the background as you're getting ready to carry this out, so give it a try. Thanks.
All right.
I'm looking at the panel right now. I'm seeing just a bunch of great one-liners that you've done. And I hope that this is going to be instructive for you as well. For some of you who are really, really deeply into your own course, you understand that core message has to keep coming forward. And look at some of these real analysis, prove theorems learned in calculus. Understand and apply basic concepts in psychology. Very simple, very direct. Support students by collecting and analyzing data. Right on target for what you expect to be doing. Details is what you have to be good about. Love it.
I love
Communicate arguments and ideas in Spanish.
Did you see ethics in science and engineering? Maybe why we should not do that. But again, these things give focus.
I find that's fantastic. And I can just feel you as presenters perhaps even saying those words at the beginning of your session, at the beginning of the course, and reminding students. And I would suggest you continue to come back to that. These are the kind of things that you can write in under that heading of the purpose of this course is, or some way of focusing their attention, and just love what we've got here. Learn algebra through modeling. So read and interpret literary texts from a personal perspective. I think you pulled that off in 8 words. Well done. That's right on 8 for that one. That's of course in Shakespeare. So thank you very much for the focusing that you have shown me on the chat panel here. I think you got what the task was. And while it may well be the case that you will change that slightly as you begin to truly get that course ready for delivery, or that session ready for delivery. I'm really proud of the way you've been able to focus your attention and in this short period of time that I've given you as well. So another way to use this principle immediately in your classroom is to give your students a roadmap, both daily and across the semester. A roadmap, a pathway, a direction, something that signifies a goal for them. You'll see a number of these statements that we give put clarity at the heart of helping our students move through the course. So in the syllabus, many of you provide a yearly or semester-length calendar itself, and I urge you, suggest you continue to do that and make that very clear as to how to appoint your students to that calendar on a weekly basis. Oftentimes we have to deviate from that calendar. On a daily basis, my colleague Chris Gorman reminds me again and again that faculty often put the tasks for the day up in the upper right-hand corner of a whiteboard, and the suggestion on that one is to continue to keep putting it in the same place. As you do that, students will know where to look, where to see the roadmap. Perhaps even as you finish with one of those topics, you can erase it off the whiteboard and let them know you're on to the second task for the day. Sometimes we use verbal cueing, so we cue our students all the time. I was at UMD earlier this year and had a faculty member who was teaching a course on theories of strategic management, and she was really very good at saying the first strategy, and then onward she would go for the next 2 or 3 minutes. And then she would say the second strategy, and sometimes you really just have to cue people in to those sort of ideas. And it's a really nice way of keeping yourself and keeping your students on track. So give students a roadmap. The third focus for this under this principle is to establish priorities in terms of your preparation, in terms of your daily focus, and key messages to students. What do I mean by that? In terms of preparation, my suggestion is to ask yourself this question every day. It will stop you in your tracks, and that is that the most important thing I need to do today is what? What's the most important thing I need to do? How would you finish that sentence? And what you write after that is you're focusing for that day. You're focusing for where you want students to be going for that 50-minute period, or if you're in a presentation for the next hour or half hour, whatever the length of the time is. The most important thing I need to do today is what? So you don't have 6 most important things, you have 1 thing. And place your time trying to determine what that most important thing is. On the daily focus, here's something you actually can say. Some version of this might be something you would actually say to your students. Today we're going to put our attention on, and in that setting, students are going to be perking up and listening carefully. If they're taking notes, they're going to be typing on their keyboard at that time, or they're going to be writing down their notes. Today we're going to put our attention on, or some version, some statement that sounds like that. A nice way to establish your priority. You are providing them with a priority when you use words like that. Sometime throughout that session, perhaps right at the end or right near the end, you might find yourself saying a statement like, if you remember only one idea from today, it should be, and now students are writing like mad. But there's a nice way to do this one as well, and that is to perhaps not finish that sentence and ask them to finish it. So you might say, if you remember only one idea from today, it should be, and then you would say what? Students, how would you finish that sentence? Write that down, and I'll write it down as well. Here we write them down in some corner, take a minute or so to do that, and then you can get students to sort of call that out. You might be surprised that many of them are probably congruent with what you are thinking, but a pretty large number may not be. And that would be okay, certainly if they bring forward ideas that are truly the heart, again, what you want them to remember from that day. But asking that question is a really important way of focusing their attention, keeping them on track as well. If you type in to a Google search the words assertion evidence, you'll get more than what you expect under how to carry out this way of summarizing the meaning of a slide or a set of slides. So here's what we've got in front of us, and we have a short task coming up as well. So here's the assertion evidence procedure. The Coricalis Glacier in Peru has retreated 1.14 kilometers between 78 and 2016. So I would probably try to shorten that a little bit, but that's a pretty good assertion. That's an assertion, a statement that should be at the top of a slide. What's the evidence? The evidence is right below you in that image. On the left-hand side is what it was in 1978, and on the right side is what it is in 2016. So this is an example of a skill that a presenter can use in providing not merely a header that says, here's the Coricalis Glacier in 1978 and 2016, but an actual assertion that makes a statement about what's happened. Maybe it's obvious, but make it even more obvious by actually making that assertion out loud and in written form as well. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do a short task on. This is a set of slides. This is a slide that focuses on the unemployment rates and earnings by educational attainment in 2017. A very common header for a slide, but it's not really an assertion. It's just a header. It is produced by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and you can see on the left-hand side they have education, everything from a doctoral degree on down to those who have less than a high school diploma. Aligned with that are something about the unemployment rate. So, if you see at the bottom the total unemployment rate, when someone announces the average unemployment rate for the month or the year was 3.6%, that is, of course, not the same unemployment rate for everyone with those backgrounds. You see it's different for a doctoral degree at 1.5 than it is to the bottom for those in less than a high school diploma who have a 6.5% unemployment rate. As well, on the right-hand side is the median weekly earnings. You can see it's up at the $1,700 or $1,800 per week for those with a doctoral degree and a professional degree, and on down to $520 for those with less than a high school diploma. So I'd like you to try your hand at writing out, instead of that header at the top, another statement. Let's say, again, 8 words or less. That would be your assertion for this slide. Think hard about this. This is the kind of thing that can take minutes, but I'm only going to give you about a minute or so. When you complete that, I'll have a statement myself at the bottom. Most of the time, students, the participants do this a little bit better than me. So I'm going to try to read out aloud some of those things. Put them in the chat panel to the right. And Chris, we're ready to go on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. Got about a minute. Try to write an assertion statement that would be similar to what you just saw in the previous slide.
And then as people are working, we've got a question here about the difference between this, I think, summer assertion evidence approach and the presentation summary recommendations about minimal text.
Very good.
So maybe you can address that as we come back. So go ahead and try your hand. Type a couple in. We'll give you maybe like 20 seconds to wrap up some thoughts here, and then we'll keep rolling.
I'm going to read a few of these out loud, and I'll show you what I have on my next slide, but I absolutely love what I'm looking at on here. One of them's a little long, of course. I have to see if you would tweak, and you probably would do that. That's the unemployment and education negatively correlate with increased levels of education. You are exactly right. If you had to shorten that, how might you pull that off? You see that the individual below, you probably wrote it in another way. This is very, very clever. The more you learn, the more you earn. More education equals more pay and work. Wonderful. Blaine, I like Blaine's better than mine. Yeah, you're right. You're referring to Blaine's there.
Learning with more earnings.
Yeah.
These are great.
Education boosts employment and earnings. Wonderful. I think you're exactly where these things should be. Advanced learning equals more earning. So, by trying to keep this short, the presentations then slides that Gar Reynolds has created and has talked about over the years now, and that's that one of the books I recommended. He's always showing very, very few words on a slide. Sometimes it's just a single word, but it's often quite short overall. And I don't know if he has an actual number that he tries to carry out, but short is usually good. It just requires some thinking to do that well. And here's what I wrote at the bottom. Mine was more education, improves prospects for earnings and employment. There's a couple that hopefully I can hang on to this chat panel, Chris, because there's a bunch of great ideas here. I'm going to actually switch with mine when I do this slide again at another presentation. Love them, really, really nicely done. And what I'm saying by this again, just by summarizing this, is I'm suggesting that when you put a slide up and you're trying to provide a core message, that this assertion that you're providing very quickly tunes students into what that slide means. Now, with that, let me say that we want our students to be able to do this. And so somewhere in the second, third, or fifth week, or somewhere later on in your session, you want your participants and your students to be able to write those out, just like you've been doing right now in the chat panel. That's where the work comes. Whoever does the work does the learning. And so we want our students to be able to do this. And again, comparing them with other students, this is a great example of a slide that you could use in a test if you were in a course focusing on finance. And giving students a slide and saying, write a core message for this is a totally legitimate kind of statement to give, and see what kind of phrasing that they would come up with as well. Well done. So here's the big take-home message for you. My short take-home message: do less more thoroughly. This is not my words, but actually the words of one of my mentors, Harry Walcott, who had a number of scenarios in which he uses. He was a book writer as a qualitative researcher. I was talking a lot about data collection and how one should reduce the amount of data that we're actually going to be talking about in the presentation of that data. But I have used it in many different ways over the years in curriculum, and trying to keep the curriculum. I was a faculty member for years as well, trying to keep the curriculum down to the least number of courses we really do need in a major. That's a hard one to sell to a department chair, but it really is the focus. From a daily standpoint, what's the least number of things I can focus on that day? How can I keep my core message in front of myself? And certainly in my preparation for that course as well. So do less more thoroughly. That is a hard message for people who are very tuned into, and I was for years, into the content in terms of how much we have to get out in terms of an accrediting body, perhaps, suggesting I need to cover a lot of work. And I'm going to suggest that you work really, really hard on trying to be as depth-filled as you can on the kind of presentations you have. That was the first principle. Here's our second principle we'll be focusing on: concrete. Concrete comes from a Latin derivative that means to grow together or to harden. It's a great metaphor, certainly, for the work that we do as presenters, to try to cement down in our participants' minds the ideas that we are trying to work through for that given day or for that semester. And I'm suggesting that concrete can be aimed at least three different ways here. One of them are the kind of images that we have on our slides, or the kind of images we bring forward, what we present to our participants and students. That we take advantage of familiar language, and that we also be deeply invested in examples. Examples are very powerful for all of our participants, and we're going to get to all three of those in just a minute. So the first one, what is it about images? Images are remembered very well by the brain. We often may forget some of the text that goes with it, but the image is pretty hard to forget. They are remembered well because of their symbolism, because of their emotional appeal, because of their connection to story. This photo on the left is at the end of World War II. Famous photo here is Victory in Europe Day. person coming home to the United States, and the camera person caught it right at the right time. The photo on the right is maybe one of the most famous headers for the National Geographic of a number of decades ago. That's probably 30 years old. And these piercing eyes by this individual, and also the background behind her story made this a very memorable slide. And we have many, many images that you have all come across in your lives that are very powerful. So how can we take advantage of this principle immediately in our classroom in terms of our images, in terms of our language, and also our examples? So first one to focus on is our examples. And I want you to get your workbook ready. We're going to be taking a look inside the workbook in just a minute or so. Examples are important. They are very powerful. We use them. Every discipline uses them. We use them to explain ideas. We use them to illustrate ideas. We use them to justify concepts. And if you are going to be a presenter or a teacher who takes advantage of examples, I think you're going down the right road to be doing this. And here's our task that I want you to spend a few minutes on, and this is in the workbook. I want you to try to get to that workbook page, which is on the Z-link that Chris has in front of us. And Chris, are they able to click into this as well?
Yeah, Mary sent the link. It's right there in the chat box.
So Mary's got the link in the chat box. Thank you, Mary. Again, just go ahead and click on that. And I want to talk very briefly through what you have in front of you in the workbook, and then a short task, a short poll again to do in relation to this. So you should have in front of you a series of 11 formats. It's on 2 different pages. It would be on probably page 2 of your workbook and page 3. And on the left-hand side is the formats themselves. I start alphabetically with analogy, and I go on to the next page all the way through video. So these are formats that are available to us to use as we try to talk through our examples or try to describe those examples. On the right-hand side, opposite each of those formats, is an example in a particular discipline. I tried to use a number of different disciplines, and so you can see that, for example, under demonstration or performance, an instructor in a school of music demonstrates an example of art form by having students listen repetitively to Barber's Adagio for strings. Demonstrations or performance are very common in my own discipline, which is kinesiology. And, of course, they are used in other disciplines as well. A photograph, for those of you who are in geology, I suggest that geology uses satellite photographs of shrinking ice masses as an example of global climate change. You know, we could verbalize all these examples if we like, but there's nothing like having formats like this available to us. If you turn the page and look on the next side, in many, many disciplines, problems themselves are examples. So in statistics, an instructor uses factor analysis to her graduate class through examples of the utility of data sets from her past research. Stories, of course, are also wonderful formats for examples, as are videos. So here we go with our poll question.
Well, you still have that handout open. Think about which of these you're using in your own teaching.
So the poll question for Concrete is to think of all of the classes or all the presentations you have done in the past. Keep those 11 formats in front of you for constructing examples. First question is about how many of these formats have you used in your teaching. So if it's 1 to 3, you would click on that button. If you used 4 to 7, you'd click on that button. And if it's 8 or more, you'd click on that button. So you're talking now, thinking about all of the classes that you've taught. So that's a lot of different courses that some of you have taught, or a number of different presentations. When you look at those formats, have you used
anywhere from 1 to 3, 4 to 7, or 8 or more. The second item on this is just to think about one course that you know well, one presentation that you know well. What are the top 2 formats that you use most frequently? As you go down and drag you down through those, I've listed them on the left-hand side, again from A to V, to try to click on 2 of those that you use most frequently in any one course. So go ahead and get started on that, and Chris will give them a minute or 2 as they complete this poll.
Yeah, just go ahead and come back to the WebEx window, type in your poll. I see a bunch of you have already successfully come back over. And once we've got most of you finished up here, we'll close this poll. And remember to hit submit once you have made your selections. Otherwise, you don't get to see them. All right, we'll take another 30 seconds here. And so if you haven't hit submit, go ahead and click it. And I've got about 10 of you left. And I'll have you quick make a decision, hit that submit button, make sure we can see it. 8 of you left. All right, I'll give you a countdown here. 10, 9, 8, last 5 of you, you're doing great. 3, 5, 4, I lost track. 3, 2, 1. I'll turn it back to Jim.
You got it. Thanks so much. And very, very interesting, as you look at the poll results themselves, you can see that nearly half of you have used quite a few of these formats. And I just wanted to sort of remind you and acknowledge how important all these different formats are for taking advantage of the examples that are a part of your presentations or your teaching. So we're talking a very large number of people have used anywhere from 4 to 7, and some of you use perhaps or even all 10 of these you have used at one point. You know, that's not going to happen in any one single session you do, perhaps not even for a single course, but for those of you who have a lot of background in teaching or in presenting, yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of work that you've been doing, and again, congratulate you on taking advantage of all these. I urge you to continue to do that. Second question was about a single course that you might know well, and what are the top 2 formats that you use. And as I look at the results themselves, I see a very solid number behind case studies. So many of you use case studies of one format or another. Lots of you use diagrams. Of course, diagrams are very common in the sciences. Of course, in the social sciences as well. I can see people taking advantage of diagrams and figures. Photographs, whether it's on slides or something you'll show in front of others. The problem itself, you know, if you are an engineer or a calculus instructor or someone who frequently uses problems as the heart of what you do, of course, it's going to be rep and fun. That's an example. Every time you provide a problem itself, it is an example of something that is important to know within your discipline. Stories, at least a quarter of you or a quarter of the responses have come under the heading of a story. Even if you consider yourself perhaps not a storyteller, you know, stories themselves do not have to be long. They are not 5 minutes. They won't be listened to for 5 minutes and probably not even a minute, but you'd be surprised what we can conclude in about 30 seconds. And, of course, verbal descriptions are very common, and we often just simply verbalize our examples at this point. So my summary of this would be lots of these are being used. They're being used by many of you, and continue with that. Find the ones that work for you. Find the ones that you do well, and every now and then consider that there are some other ways that you may be able to take advantage of these different formats. One of the signal contributions that Howard Gardner made in his book, Changing Minds, is that when you provide a particular idea or concept and you support it by 2 different kinds of formats, so perhaps you have an analogy and you also follow it with a photograph, or you have a diagram and you also tell a story about it as well, that using 2 or even more than 2 of these is a very solid way to cement down that idea. I have no expectation that you would ever bring all 10 forward, but you know, we really should try to use more than one format. 2 of them is a really powerful lever we have available. Another part of this concrete principle that we're working through is to take a long look at the kind of language we use and to monitor that language, to try to adjust that language
lots of us have very informal talk that we use with our students or participants, maybe at the beginning of the presentation or at the beginning as students are coming in. Or some of you are very informal in your discussions with students throughout. And on the far end, while I have the word slang and I have the word scholarly on the other end, my suggestion is to really be conscious of the language itself that we use and to try to find a way to monitor that language, to adjust that language when needed, because the more of our language that we find ourselves moving into more concrete language, when we talk about a language that can be apprehended by the five senses, it is simply understood better and differently. And it's really what students are bringing forward when they say, can you give me an example? There's nothing wrong with talking in a scholarly manner. I expect us to do that. We should be doing that. We simply want to be conscious of the kind of jargon that we use with our audience, as it's hard to tune into that. But of course, our students need to learn the language of the discipline as well. Those are the two poles we have there. Big take-home message for concrete is, of course, solidify your material. Solidify that material through vivid imagery, clear language, and memorable examples. Finally, our last principle that we'll be focusing on for today is emotional. And emotional is a term that I've had to, and bringing emotion itself into the presentation is something I've just had to wrestle with for myself over the years. And I used to think I didn't bring much emotion forward in my presentations, but I saw myself on videotape and had others listen to me as well and provide me some feedback. And our students are certainly, and our audience is certainly going to be swayed by the way we bring emotion forward. And it, of course, doesn't have to be strong emotion. It just means our students are going to be tuned into that. So we have to help. We have a responsibility. It really is our job to help the audience care about the content. We might think, well, they should naturally care just as I care as a faculty member or as a presenter, and unfortunately, they usually require a little bit of help from our end. So I'm going to suggest that we try to make sure we are part of helping our students, helping our audience care about that content. A reminder again, and my one of my books called The Spark of Learning by Sarah Kavanaugh, Sarah reminds us that durable learning has an emotional foundation, and you can, your own experience would bring that forward, would make that very obvious as well. What do emotions do? They harness student attention. They draw students in. It helps to mobilize their effort as well. So emotions harness student attention. I would also suggest that emotional resonance, how we connect with our students, can eat reason for lunch. Emotional resonance is a powerful, powerful lever that we need to take full advantage of as we are providing our presentations. It helps us to compel attention by our students. So here we have how to use this in our classroom. The first, most obvious one is to be genuine and authentic in expressing your enthusiasm and your positivity for the content itself. And that is visible. That is very obvious to our audience. And authenticity and credibility is very, very important as presenters, and this authentic sense of being enthusiastic about the content is something that is catchy, it's contagious. The second one is to always be conscious of the value and purpose of the content. We have to actually say these words. We have to tell people about the value and importance and the purpose. It isn't naturally picked up by our audience, and I suggest then, again, you want to verbalize that and actually tell them why is something important. I always find that a great question, no matter how it's phrased to me. When someone reminds me of that, why do we need to know this? They'll say this one way or the other. That's a time to just really keep yourself on point and be aware, be ahead of the argument, and be ready to provide that value and purpose. We really do have to monitor nonverbal behavior. It's pretty easy to see in front of us when we're looking at an audience. And again, as you watch that nonverbal behavior, it's pretty evident about whether or not they are tuning into whether their attention is on track with you, And paying attention to that is something that's part of our job. Even in a large crowd, you're able to certainly notice when the head is down, or even when the eyes are a bit blurry. So pay attention to that, and to also remember that compelling stories help us create emotional connections with the audience. If you say again, I don't think I'm a storyteller, I don't know if I could do this, I would suggest that you consider trying it and trying to see how your own experience is of value as well. We do have a final poll question. This is your final poll for the day, and it again should be findable on your screen. Under this heading of emotional, I want you to think about a course or a presentation that you, again, know well, you're very well prepared to teach. Here's a question you typically don't ask yourself, and that is, what do you want your audiences to feel at the end of the course? We often say, what do we want them to know? And that's fine. But on the left-hand side, you can see I've written a bunch of phrasings here. You want them to feel challenged, perhaps, or committed, or confident, or all the way down. I have 10, 15 emotions on that side. Choose one or two of those emotions. Think of one course, one presentation you know well. What is it you want them to feel? Click on that and try to record that within the next minute or so. Chris, we are in good shape on this?
Great. Yeah, we're looking good. If people are finding that poll, go ahead, go to the right there, and don't forget to hit submit, because we can't see your answers if you don't. So we got a few in progress here. Why don't we just take another, again, 30 seconds to finish this up. And so I see we got about 5 people who are in the progress. So go ahead and make it some selections and hit submit here. I'll give the last 3 just a few seconds, 2 of you. I'm going to hit close, so hit submit. Nope, I see you. Yep, last one, hit submit. And, okay, I'm giving you 20 seconds, it's going to close. So go ahead.
Well, as I look on the screen here, I see that a lot of you want your students to be challenged. You want them to feel confident. Some of these words might have fairly similar meanings as to others that are phrased up there as well. But lots of people want our audience to feel that they're committed and that they are confident with the material, that they're empowered, that they're certainly motivated. These are really good signal points for us as we are preparing our session for the day, or even at the end of the semester, to say, if I really want my students or my audience to feel challenged, what am I doing to help them feel challenged, to feel committed? So that's our responsibility as well. If we believe in those emotions as key levers to help them learn the material, then we have to consider what we are doing to help them feel some of these emotions we list on there. The big take-home message, and some of this comes from Sarah Kavanaugh's book, again, The Spark of Learning. You and I, we have to be the spark that compels students to emotionally invest in the course. We're a part of that. We're a big part of that, I would say. The last few slides here, one is, again, a reminder about what these 6 principles are. They are listed in your folder under a number of different headings. As you look through the folder, you will see that these 6 principles will come up in much more detail. Of course, the book itself, Made to Stick, describes these in detail. You should pick it up. Even though if you're walking through an airport, you'll find it very easily. It's that orange book. I still take advantage of this book. I've written all over it, and it is a book that I've been using on and off over the number of years. One more thing. This is a famous kind of finish that Steve Jobs always did. He's always just one more thing. And here's the one more thing for you. For those of you who are still preparing your presentations for the semester or getting ready for that final course to be taught coming up in the next week, small changes, little changes, put regular attention on those little changes. That's how you get the growth that you want, and we all want as well. I want to thank you for your attention to this presentation, and I want to remind you again about the resource folder that's in the webinar
that Chris has put at the bottom there is the Z-link at the bottom. If you need to stay in touch with me, you see my email on there as well. So thank you so much for participating in the webinar, Developing Memorable Presentations. It's been my pleasure to serve as your presenter. I hope I can reconnect with you on the many visits I make to the system campuses. I'll be going up to UMD actually tomorrow, but I'll also be going to all of the campuses this fall as well. Please take a minute to fill out the evaluation of the presentation. It's a Z-link in the chat or the window. It'll open automatically when you log out of the WebEx. Chris, anything else we want to add here?
Oh, I just want to add that if you have any questions or comments or thoughts, feel free to toss them into the chat. We'll stick around for, a little while, and feel free to answer those as well. We can answer them either in the chat or verbally here. And as you close out, please do fill out that eval. We're experimenting with how to best do our webinars here. And thanks all for putting up with all the coughing. As you can tell, I have no voice, and it's been of joy to be with you, but sorry about that.
I think Chris has a webinar herself coming up in a couple of days, but I really want to thank her attention. She's put a lot of work into this, as have the whole team. And as I always say, this is a team effort. So I'm the presenter on this. The team has been carrying this out, and thanks so much.
Great. Well, have a great day, and we'll stick around. We're going to mute here, but we're still here until we close out this session. So feel free to toss in your questions. Thank you so much. Somebody wants to go on the UMD visit.